Alrighty, so I've had a couple people interested in hearing a little bit more about how I'm experimenting with Ambisonics for creating ambiences alongside Dolby Atmos and Pro Tools. So normally when I'm doing an ambience, I'm designing in 7.1 using objects within the Dolby Atmos renderer. If I play a little chunk of this one, which is kind of like a medical lab, I'll just hit play. And you can see here in this little theater view, this is the Dolby Atmos visual UI. You have these little green dots represent, some ventilation that I have established and some other little kind of beep boops that are positioned in the room compared to where the listener is. This is really good for creating ambiences that are, very precise and have a lot of depth and have a lot of width to them. But what I was looking for is a way to create one single file that I can use dynamically multiple times, like use it over and over, and have it sound slightly different every time, which includes rotating the entire sound field so it sounds like you are in a different vantage point in the same location, even if you might hear that location multiple times through your storytelling. Ambisonics came up as a great way to do this, and when I say that, this is kind of a misapplication of the tool. Usually ambisonic encoders and decoders are used to decode the signal from specific microphones. What I have are stereo and mono files that I want to position within a sphere that can be rotated and manipulated. The way that I'm doing that is through Audio Brewers, Ambisonics encoder and decoder plugins. So the process starts with just some very basic stereo and mono tracks. And I'll kind of take this off of here so you can actually see what that looks like. This is just a mono track. So if I go into here, I'm using third order ambisonics. So boom, there you have it. Suddenly I can click on this encoder and it's going to bring up this. And as I drag this around, you can hear that it's kind of panning it around in this space. So after I've done this to each of the tracks I want to include, as I click through these, you can kind of see they're each in different, slightly different locations. I'm going to move this to the right just to kind of give myself some variation and keep it pretty low. So once you have your files set with the encoder data on them, the other kind of thing I'm doing here is I have my reverbs set on each track, which is actually this reverb right here. I route the reverb and the tracks to an aux input set to third order ambisonics. So this is already made, but just to kind of show you the process, it's an audio track. And I'm just going to call it very generically 3OA so you can kind of see how this works. We'll go over and choose third order ambisonics. This is an aux input. Whoops. One of those lovely quirks from Pro Tools and say create. And so I would route all these tracks and my reverb to this output. And the output is already configured. This might be different for you depending on the DAW you're using, but I have a third order ambisonic output already set up in Pro Tools so it knows what to do with it. And this is where you put the decoder. And so I'm going to say, even though the encoder is all set to 7.14, I'm going to set the decoder to 7.12 because it actually matches the Dolby Atmos bed. So that way I can actually take the decoder and whatever file or aux input that the decoder is on, you can send it directly to Dolby Atmos and use it like a normal audio file. So let's move this over here. And so since I've already done this work, this is kind of, I'll just go and delete that. Ta-da, here's the track. And I just have a limit on here to kind of bring up the level of the output because it's very quiet compared to the Dolby Atmos mastering that I have. This is really just for your sake so you can actually hear what's going on. If I take a listen and then I open up the decoder, you're going to see that it has these rotation parameters. So as you start to kind of move these, you can kind of hear how it's changing the properties of the space. The first one I really look at is just this left and right one, because it has the biggest impact. And then you can kind of play with the width of it this way and kind of really tweak the sound. And that's awesome. So in my case, I want to export this file and have it exist as one file that I can bring into my projects and use over and over again. So in order to do that, I can do it a couple different ways. I can select the in and out points and go up to here and go to bounce mix, third order ambisonics, or I can go down here just directly to the aux output, right click and say bounce, and it's going to know what it's doing. And I'll just go in, I've done a few outputs on this already. We'll call this V4, and I'll say import after bounce and let it do its work. There. And I'll go ahead and bring that in. And there we have it here as my file. I'm just going to drag it down here into this track I already have made. I'm going to delete this one. So here is my ambisonic file. It just brings it in as a multi-track clip without really any of the, data manipulation. So with the encoder, I can add this to the file. If you want to use a decoder on it, you have to have the encoder on the chain first. So that's just kind of what it is. So third order ambisonics. And third order ambisonics, just like I did on the aux output. And if I just use the encoder, just worth mentioning, this is routing to my background's bed, which has some mastering on it. So I'm just going to kind of bring the volume down on this just for the sake of your ears. Maybe a little more. But as you can hear, I can already get a lot out of just using the encoder. Just changing the character and what parts of the garden I'm more proximal to. And you go into decoder. You can really hear it working. Yeah, and I forgot to show something that's pretty cool. Let me get my output soloed. This is one thing I forgot to show you. Let's get this little guy out of here. And I'm gonna open the encoder. And this is one thing that it doesn't, it's a little easier to do once you already have your ambisonic file created. It's actually this slider for distance, and this is pretty kick-ass. Let me play it and show you what this does. Ha! Just makes it really far away. So that's basically it. And so as you get these, like this file is routed directly to the Dolby Atmos renderer, so you can mix it with other ambience files, which is what this track is for. And it just really seamlessly works. So now you are still mixing in 7.1, you're still mixing Dolby Atmos and incorporating ambisonics into your workflow. And now I have a file that I can use over and over and treat dynamically, and it might sound slightly different every time. This is kind of getting into the territory of nitpickiness. If you have a background or ambience you hear over and over and you don't want to go in and make tweaks to that ambience every time, this is definitely an approach, kind of like a subtle way to prevent backgrounds from sounding overused or monotonous. And it's really simple once you have the tools to do it. There's even an open source set of tools that don't cost anything from IAM to do this, so you don't have to purchase the audio Brewers plugins or acquire those from, if you have Pro Tools and you pay for a subscription, you can access them. You can still do this. It's a very accessible workflow that just has a pretty low barrier to entry. I will say that I still prefer the depth of the 7.1 beds, but the ambisonics really are great to me because They covered the kind of middle ground territory and sounds that are not critical, but just kind of help paint a picture of space and where quality may or may not be as much of a factor. So that's pretty much it. I hope this gave you some ideas.